Picture this. I'm hauling my horse trailer down the gravel road to my family's ranch after 4 months in Washington, D.C. when red and blue lights slice through the Texas sunset. 3 squad cars, blocking my gate. And there she stands. Karen Whitmore, arms crossed, that victorious smirk plastered across her face like she just won the lottery. She's actually bouncing on her toes behind the officers. The deputy approaches my truck, hat in hand, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. "Sir, we got a trespassing complaint. This lady says you don't belong here." I glance at Karen, then at the iron sign reading, White Hawk Ranch, Estenage 1887, then back at this woman who moved into the new subdivision 3 months ago. Diesel exhaust mingles with sagebrush. Cattle are lowing somewhere in my back pasture. "Officer," I say calmly, "meet the woman who just called the cops on the guy who oversees every HOA in America." Karen's victory smile melts like ice cream in August. "What would you do if some HOA busybody tried to get you arrested on your own family land? Drop your worst HOA nightmare below and tell me where you're watching from. Let me back up and tell you how we got here. My name's Garrett Whitehawk, and 4 months ago I buried my father on this same Texas soil his grandfather broke with a plow in 1887. 2,400 acres of rolling hills, mesquite, and the finest cattle operation in Millfield County. Dad left me more than land, though. See, while I was running cattle and fixing fence, I'd been working my way up through Federal Housing Administration. When the old man passed, I got called to Washington, D.C. for a promotion regional oversight director for the Federal Housing Authority. My job? Making sure HOAs across 5 states follow the law. The irony was about to become delicious. While I was learning how to investigate crooked HOA boards and development scams, my foreman, Buck Henley, was dealing with our new neighbors. Sagebrush Estates, a fancy subdivision marketed as authentic Western living experience. Translation: California transplants paying premium prices to live next to real cowboys, then complaining about everything that makes it authentic. Enter Karen Whitmore, 48 years old, fresh from some HOA civil war in San Diego, who appointed herself neighborhood compliance coordinator before her U-Haul was unloaded. Buck described her perfectly. She's got the energy of a caffeinated chihuahua, twice the bite and about half the sense. Karen's first week? She drove by our ranch twice daily with a measuring tape, clipboard, and the determination of a health inspector at a roach motel. Buck caught her photographing our cattle through fence slats, actually taking notes on their bathroom habits like she was writing a dissertation on bovine waste management. The complaint started immediately. Certified letters piling up faster than manure in a feedlot. Excessive agricultural odors. Apparently cow manure doesn't smell like roses. Unsightly equipment storage because tractors are so offensive. Noise violations from livestock operations. Cows moo. Who knew? All filed with Millfield County by concerned citizens, which translated to Karen plus whichever neighbors she'd terrorized into submission. Buck kept me updated through scratchy phone calls to D.C. "Boss, this woman's documenting everything. Timestamps our feeding schedule, measures dust clouds with some fancy meter, even called the county claiming our access road violates her property setbacks." Here's the beautiful part. Her house sits 50 feet from our fence. Our cattle road's been there since Sam Houston was in diapers, but suddenly it's a traffic hazard incompatible with her residential character. I came home to 17 complaint letters and 1 memorable introduction at Kowalski's feed store. The smell of grain dust and leather oil hit me like a warm hug home. Then Karen cornered me by the horse supplements, extending a manicured hand like we were meeting at some ritzy charity auction. "You must be Mr. Whitehawk. I'm Karen Whitmore, community standards advocate for Sagebrush Estates." Her smile was all porcelain veneers and zero warmth. "We simply must discuss modernizing your operations to fit our neighborhood aesthetic." Behind her, old Marty Kowalski pretended to organize salt licks while clearly enjoying the show. The crunch of my boots on scattered feed echoed in the sudden silence. "Ma'am," I said, keeping my voice calm as Sunday morning, "this ranch has been here since before your neighborhood was a fever dream in some developer's head." "Oh, I completely understand the historical significance," she trilled, like she was explaining multiplication to a kindergartner. "But times change. Property values, you know. I have extensive experience with municipal compliance and valuable connections in county planning. I'm confident we can find solutions that work for everyone." The way she said solutions made it clear she meant surrender. 20 minutes she talked about community harmony and appropriate land use. while I bought cattle mineral and listened to her redesign my family's century-old operation. Never once asked about our history, our legal rights, or whether we gave a damn about her dinner party schedule, just assumed we'd roll over because Queen Karen had spoken. That night, I sat on the porch where 4 generations of Whitehawks had watched storms roll across these hills. Lightning flickered on the horizon, and I could taste rain in the air, metallic and electric. The county had scheduled a neighborhood compatibility hearing based on Karen's complaints. She wanted our cattle road moved, our equipment screened from residential view, and our feeding schedule changed to accommodate her social calendar. I sipped bourbon and smiled. Storm coming, all right. Karen Whitmore just didn't know she'd picked a fight with the one guy in America who could shut down her entire HOA with a phone call. Karen didn't waste time. Within a week, she'd transformed from solo complainer into general of a 3-person army. Meet the Sagebrush Estates Property Values Committee. Sounds official, right? Her lieutenants, Bryce Kellerman, a retired bank manager who counted pennies like they were endangered species, and Donna Hutchins, former Phoenix City Council member who'd moved to Texas to escape the very bureaucracy she'd helped create. They held their first emergency meeting at Karen's kitchen table, complete with matching folders and a PowerPoint presentation titled Agricultural Operations Impact Assessment. I'm not kidding. Buck's security cameras caught Bryce arriving with a laser pointer and portable screen, like they were planning the D-Day invasion instead of harassing a cattle ranch. Then came the beautiful irony. Karen decided to research me online and found my federal position as Regional Oversight Director. But here's what made me chuckle into my morning coffee. She completely misunderstood what I do. In her mind, I was some corrupt government lackey who oversees ranch inspections and protects agricultural interests. Perfect, she announced to her committee, voice carrying across the evening air to Buck's listening post. He's obviously biased toward ranchers. We'll go straight to Washington, over his head. I have connections in municipal planning. If she only knew those connections were about to become very interested in her HOA's compliance issues. While Karen plotted my professional destruction, I was quietly building her legal grave. Sarah Olivia, my attorney, ran a title search that revealed something delicious. I remembered my grandfather explaining these protections when I was 12, watching him argue with some long-forgotten developer. Agricultural easements are permanent legal shields that protect existing farm operations from future residential complaints. Every noise complaint Karen filed was actually strengthening our case by documenting our historical activities. The principle is simple. You can't move next to a farm, then complain about farming. The real treasure? Karen's previous addresses revealed a pattern clearer than cattle tracks in mud. 3 states, 4 communities, identical neighbor disputes. I called her former neighbor in San Diego. "Oh God, you got Karen?" Mrs. Rodriguez laughed until she snorted. She tried to get our mariachi band arrested for cultural noise violations, called immigration on our gardener, filed 17 complaints about our dog's barking. We have a cat. Karen's campaign escalated beautifully. She hired an Austin law firm specializing in nuisance abatement, fancy words for legal bullying. The smell of expensive trouble wafted through their demand letter like overpriced cologne. They threatened lawsuits for diminished property values and demanded immediate cessation of incompatible agricultural activities. Her documentation project reached obsessive levels. Karen measured noise with a decibel meter during our 6 a.m. feeding routine, the electronic beeping echoing across the pasture like some demented alarm clock. She photographed every cow pie within 50 yards of her fence. Buck caught her standing on a ladder, taking aerial photos of our equipment yard like she was conducting military reconnaissance. The community rallied faster than horses to grain. Marty Kowalski banned Karen from his feed store after she demanded to inspect our delivery trucks. Rita Sandoval, who runs the county's best diner, told Karen her dress code suggestion for customers could be filed under places the sun don't shine. That woman, Rita said, sliding coffee across the scarred Formica counter, complained about my chicken and dumplings being too ethnically aromatic. In Texas, the audacity could choke a horse. The sound of Rita's coffee pot hitting the burner punctuated her disgust like a judge's gavel. Karen's legal team escalated with their first official demand: cease cattle operations within 200 yards of residential property, relocate equipment storage, establish sound barriers for livestock areas. Cost estimate: $340,000 in ranch modifications to accommodate neighbors who'd moved next to an existing operation. She organized a Facebook campaign called Millfield County Rural Reform. posting professionally photographed evidence of our violations. Half her photos showed normal ranch activities that had been legal since before Texas statehood. The other half documented our cattle doing revolutionary things like eating grass and existing while being cows. The entertainment peaked when Karen measured our fence height with a surveyor's rod, documenting potential sightline violations. Bessie, our most social heifer, wandered over to investigate this strange human behavior. Karen shrieked like she'd encountered a grizzly and ran for her SUV, abandoning expensive equipment in her panic. "Boss," Buck called, chuckling, "I got video of our neighbor being chased by a 1,000-pound cow who just wanted to say howdy. This beats cable TV." The county scheduled our neighborhood compatibility hearing for next month. Karen was confident her charts, graphs, and multimedia presentation would prove our ranch was an anachronistic nuisance, incompatible with modern residential development. What she didn't know, I'd already spoken with Marcus Webb, the county planning director and Dad's old fishing buddy. Marcus reviewed our agricultural easement and laughed until coffee came out his nose. "Garrett, this woman's complaints are legally meaningless. Your protections predate her subdivision by a century, but let her have her hearing might be educational for everyone involved." Karen thought she was building a case against us. Actually, she was documenting exactly why agricultural protections exist and why HOAs can't override century-old property rights. Karen's war machine kicked into overdrive. She launched Millfield County Rural Reform with a professional website featuring dramatic photos of our ranch operations cattle grazing apparently qualified as visual pollution in her world. She contacted Channel 7 about outdated agricultural exemptions hurting innocent homeowners and organized a petition drive demanding ranch modernization requirements. The woman was thorough, I'll give her that. She discovered our property tax records and filed a complaint claiming the ranch was underassessed compared to residential properties. The smell of bureaucratic meddling hung in the air like diesel exhaust on a still morning. But here's where Karen's amateur detective work backfired spectacularly. She found out I owned mineral rights under a portion of her precious subdivision information that's public record if you know where to look. Most people don't understand that in Texas, mineral rights often stay with original landowners even when surface land gets developed. Karen assumed this gave her ammunition against me, threatening to expose conflicts of interest to my federal supervisors. She had no clue that owning mineral rights actually strengthened my legal position while her complaints were building a beautiful case for harassment. Watching someone dig their own grave with such enthusiasm was almost painful. I responded with the patience my grandfather taught me when dealing with spooked cattle, calm, steady, and strategic. Sarah Olivia began documenting Karen's harassment pattern for a potential restraining order. I continued my federal HOA oversight training through online modules, learning fascinating details about communities that fail to meet development obligations. The ranch community rallied like neighbors should. The Ranchers Association offered legal fund assistance, though we didn't need it yet. Millfield High School's FFA chapter wrote a letter supporting our operations. Those kids understand agriculture better than most adults. The Chamber of Commerce passed a resolution backing agricultural heritage, and 3 subdivision residents privately apologized, distancing themselves from Karen's crusade. Karen's next move revealed just how disconnected she was from Texas law. She attempted to get our ranch declared a public nuisance through city council petition, apparently unaware that Millfield city limits ended 2 miles from our property. The public meeting where she presented her case to a confused council became local legend. "Ma'am," the mayor explained gently, "we have no jurisdiction over county land. You might want to research municipal boundaries before filing petitions." The room's collective wince was audible. But Karen doubled down, claiming I was intimidating residents through threatening behavior, her evidence being security footage of cattle grazing peacefully in our pasture. Meanwhile, Sarah Olivia's investigation uncovered something delicious. The subdivision developer had cut corners on environmental impact studies, and original permits required a 200-foot agricultural buffer that was never implemented. Karen's house sat 50 feet from our property line, violating original development conditions. Even better, the county inspector found multiple HOA violations throughout Sagebrush Estates: unpermitted fences, drainage issues, and buildings that exceeded height restrictions. Turns out Karen's community had bigger legal problems than cow manure smells. The irony kept building. During one of my federal training sessions about municipal compliance, I learned that HOAs managing developments built with any federal funding or tax incentives fall under oversight jurisdiction. A quick records check revealed Sagebrush Estates had received exactly those benefits during construction. Karen scheduled a community meeting at the subdivision clubhouse to present evidence against our ranch, inviting local media without consulting other residents. The taste of impending justice was sweeter than Rita's peach cobbler. Buck's security cameras captured Karen's daily reconnaissance missions, photographing our cattle through fence slats, measuring dust levels with handheld devices, and documenting feeding schedules like she was preparing for war. The woman had turned harassment into a full-time occupation. "She's out there again," Buck reported one morning, "taking pictures of the bulls. I swear she's got more documentation on our cattle than the Department of Agriculture." The community meeting arrived with all the drama Karen could have hoped for, just not the kind she expected. 15 residents attended, mostly out of curiosity rather than support. Karen presented her slideshow with dramatic music and professional graphics, detailing every alleged violation our century-old ranch committed against her 3-month-old sensibilities. Then I arrived, uninvited but perfectly within my rights as a county resident. Karen's face cycled through surprise, anger, and panic as I calmly addressed each complaint with documented facts and legal precedents. "Mrs. Whitmore," I said, standing near the back of the room, "you're asking a 150-year-old ranch to change operations for a subdivision built 3 months ago. That's like moving next to an airport and complaining about airplane noise." Several residents asked pointed questions about Karen's previous neighbor disputes. Her support evaporated faster than morning dew in August heat. The county planning office announced a review of the subdivision's permit compliance, triggered by all those complaints Karen had filed. Sometimes the best revenge is letting someone hang themselves with their own rope. Karen realized her media strategy had backfired, her legal threats were toothless, and her community was turning against her. But like a wounded animal, that's when she'd become most dangerous. The real fun was just beginning. Karen's desperation led her to Channel 7's investigative team with a story pitch that would have made Hollywood screenwriters jealous. Federal employee abuses power to intimidate neighbors. She provided edited footage of our ranch operations, emphasizing dust clouds and morning feeding noise, claiming to represent dozens of affected families in her fight against government corruption. The smell of her own panic must have been overwhelming because Karen was making rookie mistakes left and right. Here's where her media gambit exploded in her face like a faulty firework. Reporter Jake Morrison started investigating, but instead of focusing on ranch violations, he discovered Karen's trail of neighbor disputes across 3 states. The story shifted from "problem rancher terrorizes subdivision" to "problem neighbor targets longtime agricultural operation." Morrison found building permit violations throughout Sagebrush Estates, documented Karen's pattern of harassment complaints, and interviewed former neighbors who painted a picture of someone who turned conflict into a career. When he called requesting an interview, I realized this was my chance to educate people about a bigger problem. I explained my actual federal role HOA oversight, not ranch inspection, and provided documentation of Karen's escalating harassment. The timing was perfect. I mentioned my upcoming presentation to a congressional subcommittee about HOA accountability and federal reform initiatives. Karen's response was pure panic. Realizing her media strategy had backfired spectacularly, she attempted damage control by claiming she was protecting community standards against government overreach. She organized an emergency HOA board meeting to change subdivision rules and proposed a special assessment to fund legal action against our ranch. The community meeting turned into a masterclass in how not to win friends and influence people. Karen presented her slideshow of ranch violations with all the drama of a murder trial, complete with ominous background music and red arrows pointing at our cattle like they were criminal evidence. I showed up uninvited, perfectly legal for any county resident, and calmly dismantled every claim with facts and documentation. When Karen accused our cattle of creating excessive noise pollution, I pointed out that her own decibel readings showed levels lower than typical suburban lawnmowers. "Mrs. Whitmore," I said, the room silent except for the hum of fluorescent lights, "according to your own measurements, our cattle register at 45 decibels during feeding time. Your neighbor's leaf blower hits 70 decibels every Saturday morning." Several residents started asking uncomfortable questions about Karen's previous legal disputes. Turns out people don't appreciate being misled into potential litigation that could cost them thousands in special assessments. Meanwhile, My investigation into subdivision compliance was revealing fascinating details. Sarah Olivia discovered that when the original developer went bankrupt, all permit obligations transferred to the HOA. That included $340,000 in unfulfilled environmental compliance work that Karen's board was legally responsible for completing. The subdivision's HOA lacked legal standing to challenge our operations anyway. The original developer had included protective clauses for adjacent agricultural use standard practice when building near existing farms. Karen's proposed special assessment required 75% resident approval, and support was evaporating faster than puddles in July heat. My federal training had taught me that many HOAs fail to understand their ongoing legal obligations from original development permits. When developers cut corners or go bankrupt, homeowners inherit problems they never knew existed. It's a nationwide issue that costs communities millions annually. Karen's allies began jumping ship like rats from a sinking vessel. Bryce Kellerman publicly withdrew from her Property Values Committee after learning about agricultural easements and his potential liability for permit violations. Donna Hutchins quietly told neighbors she'd been misled about the legal complexities and was moving back to Phoenix. The entertainment reached peak absurdity when Karen attempted to measure our fence height with a surveyor's rod, documenting potential sightline violations. Our protective mother cow, Dolly, had recently calved and wasn't tolerating strangers near her baby. Karen's shriek could probably be heard in the next county as she fled, leaving expensive equipment scattered in the dirt. "Boss," Buck called, barely containing his laughter. "That woman just got chased off by a mama cow protecting her calf. Even our livestock think she's a nuisance." Jake Morrison's preliminary article hit the local paper like a bombshell. Subdivision faces environmental compliance crisis. The piece detailed permit violations, financial mismanagement, and legal obligations that could bankrupt individual homeowners through special assessments. Karen realized her complaints had triggered the exact investigation that threatened her own property value and financial stability. Every noise violation she documented created evidence supporting our ranch's historical operations. Every agency she'd contacted was now scrutinizing her community's compliance failures. The county planning office announced an accelerated review of subdivision permits triggered by the volume of complaints Karen had filed. Environmental agencies were asking questions about drainage, sound barriers, and buffer zones that should have been completed years ago. Karen had spent months trying to prove our ranch was incompatible with residential development. Instead, she documented exactly why agricultural protections exist and demonstrated that her subdivision was the real problem. The trap had been set by her own hand. She just didn't realize she was standing in it. Sarah Olivia's title search hit the jackpot on a Tuesday morning that changed everything. I was reviewing federal HOA compliance regulations over coffee when she called with news that made me nearly choke on my first sip. "Garrett, you need to see this immediately. The subdivision developer never filed the required agricultural impact mitigation plan." The document spread across her oak conference table told a story better than any fiction. Sagebrush Estates' approval was conditional. They were supposed to establish a 200-foot buffer zone, install sound barriers, and complete environmental compliance work estimated at $340,000. The developer went bankrupt before fulfilling any of these requirements, legally transferring all obligations to the HOA. Karen's board was now responsible for every single compliance cost the original developer had dodged. The power dynamic shifted like tectonic plates. Every noise complaint Karen had filed created documentation proving our ranch's pre-existing rights. Every dust measurement she'd taken supported our historical operations. Every agency she'd contacted was now investigating why her community hadn't met legal requirements. The irony was delicious enough to taste. In my federal training, I'd learned about developments that received tax incentives or federal funding, like Sagebrush Estates, which automatically fall under HOA oversight jurisdiction. Karen had been harassing the one person in America with authority to investigate her community's regulatory failures. Sarah's investigation revealed something even more damaging. Karen's house specifically violated setback requirements from the original permits. She'd built 50 feet from our property line when regulations required 200 feet. Her dream home was technically an illegal structure. "This gets better," Sarah continued, sliding another document across the table. "The subdivision's stormwater management system relies on natural drainage through your ranch property. The original permits acknowledged this dependency. Restricting your operations could cause flooding throughout their community." Karen's vulnerability was complete. Property values she claimed to protect would crater if county enforcement action required compliance work. The special assessment to fund necessary improvements would be approximately $12,000 per household, money her community couldn't afford and she definitely couldn't pay. I remembered my grandfather's advice about dealing with aggressive neighbors. Sometimes the best defense is letting folks tie their own noose. Karen had spent months creating documentation that proved our ranch was beneficial to the area while her subdivision was the real problem. The federal angle made it even sweeter. As regional oversight director, I had authority to investigate HOAs that failed to meet development obligations. I could recommend state intervention if communities couldn't address permit violations. My upcoming congressional testimony could feature Sagebrush Estates as a perfect example of HOA accountability failures. Sarah pulled out the final piece of evidence. Financial records showing the subdivision's HOA had failed to file required annual reports for 2 consecutive years. In federal oversight terms, they were operating as an unregulated entity while managing a development built with public tax incentives. Karen doesn't understand what she's unleashed, Sarah said, organizing the documents into neat stacks. Every complaint she filed helps us. She's documented why your ranch should stay exactly as it is while proving her community violated multiple regulations. The beautiful truth crystallized like morning frost. I didn't need to fight Karen directly. Her own actions would force her community to address real problems while leaving our ranch protected by law. She'd become the architect of her own destruction. Karen thought she was David fighting Goliath. Actually, she was Goliath falling on her own sword while David watched from a safe distance. The taste of justice was sweeter than Rita's apple pie and twice as satisfying. Karen's harassment campaign had triggered investigations that would either bankrupt her community or force them to spend hundreds of thousands fixing problems they'd ignored for years. All I had to do was continue normal ranch operations while Karen's house of cards collapsed under the weight of her own complaints. Time to assemble the cavalry. Sarah Olivia spread legal documents across her conference table like a general planning a military campaign. Buck Henley arrived with 40 years of ranch operation records, proving our historical precedents down to the day we first drove cattle down that disputed road. Rita Sandoval offered her diner as neutral meeting ground and promised the best coffee in 3 counties to fuel our strategy sessions. Marcus Webb from County Planning brought the bureaucratic firepower, explaining how permit enforcement worked and agreeing to accelerate the subdivision's compliance review. Channel 7's Jake Morrison wanted exclusive access to our story as it unfolded. The man smelled a regional Emmy in the making. Our 3-pronged strategy emerged over Rita's legendary chicken fried steak and strong black coffee that could wake the dead. The legal track was Sarah's domain. We'd file a counter-complaint against the subdivision for permit violations, request county enforcement of original development conditions, and prepare documentation for my potential restraining order against Karen. As backup, I'd ready a federal HOA compliance investigation, the nuclear option that could shut down their entire community governance. Sarah's research had revealed something fascinating about agricultural easements that I'd learned from my grandfather but never fully appreciated. These protections aren't just suggestions, they're permanent legal shields that run with the land forever. When developers build near existing farms, they're acknowledging that agricultural activities take precedence. You can't buy property next to a working ranch, then demand it stop working. The community track required more finesse. I coordinated with the Ranchers Association to show unified support at the upcoming county meeting. We arranged testimonials from longtime residents about our ranch's community value, people who remembered my father helping during the '98 flood and my grandfather donating land for the volunteer fire station. Local businesses were already rallying. Marty Kowalski documented how Karen's complaints affected his feed store customers. Dr. Sarah Martinez, our veterinarian, prepared statements about our exemplary animal care standards. Even the postmaster offered to testify about our road safety record, no mail delivery incidents in 37 years. We planned Heritage Day at the ranch, showcasing our historical significance to the community. The smell of barbecue smoke and the sound of fiddle music would demonstrate what authentic Western heritage actually meant, not Karen's sanitized suburban fantasy. The federal track was my specialty. During my Washington training, I'd learned that developments receiving any federal funding or tax incentives automatically qualify for HOA oversight review. Sagebrush Estates had received exactly those benefits, making them subject to federal accountability standards they'd been ignoring for years. I gathered data on HOA compliance failures for my congressional subcommittee presentation. using our local situation as a case study in development oversight problems. The timing was perfect. Legislators were drafting stronger HOA accountability measures, and real-world examples carried more weight than theoretical proposals. My federal colleagues were fascinated by the agricultural angle. Many rural communities faced similar pressures from suburban expansion, and our case could establish precedents protecting agricultural operations nationwide. The economic analysis was compelling. Our ranch provided $180,000 annually in local economic activity through feed, veterinary, and equipment purchases. Buck's security footage became crucial evidence. We had documented proof of Karen's daily harassment, measuring fence lines at dawn, photographing cattle through slats, following our supply trucks, and conducting what could only be described as agricultural surveillance. The woman had turned neighbor complaints into a full-time obsession. Environmental impact assessments revealed the beautiful irony. Our ranch operations actually improved local air quality and soil stability compared to intensive residential development. The subdivision's stormwater system depended on natural drainage through our property. Original permits acknowledged this relationship, making our operations essential to their community's environmental compliance. During one strategy session at Rita's, the pieces clicked together like a well-oiled machine. Every aggressive move Karen made created more documentation of harassment. Her complaints to multiple agencies had accelerated regulatory review processes. Community support was solidifying as her tactics became increasingly extreme. The perfect storm was brewing. County planning would address subdivision permit compliance at month's end. Federal HOA oversight had announced compliance review tours in our region. The local newspaper planned a feature story on agricultural heritage for the county's 150th anniversary. Jake Morrison's investigative piece was scheduled for Sweeps Week, guaranteeing maximum viewership. Sarah organized our legal documents with military precision. Buck prepared historical ranch operation demonstrations for the heritage event. Rita coordinated community support logistics. Marcus scheduled the crucial county meeting. Jake Morrison confirmed his camera crew's availability. I received the call that made everything perfect. The congressional subcommittee requesting my testimony about HOA oversight failures, with specific interest in using local case studies. Karen's harassment campaign had inadvertently provided me with a national platform to address systemic problems affecting rural communities across America. The taste of impending victory was sweeter than Rita's famous peach cobbler. Karen thought she was fighting a local rancher. She was actually battling federal housing policy, state agricultural protections, county planning authority, and community solidarity. All we had to do was let her keep digging while we prepared to fill in the hole. Karen's desperation reached new levels of creative destruction. She placed anonymous calls to the state veterinarian claiming livestock abuse, apparently believing that well-fed cattle in clean pastures constituted animal cruelty. She contacted the IRS suggesting our ranch operations were hobby farming tax fraud, a laughable claim considering our consistent profitability and proper documentation spanning 3 generations. The woman's paranoia drove her to offer cash payments to our seasonal workers, trying to recruit them as informants. Buck caught wind of this through his nephew, Miguel, who worked summer hay crews, and reported Karen approaching him with $50 and questions about our illegal activities. She wanted to know if we dumped chemicals in the creek or mistreated animals, Miguel told Buck, shaking his head. I told her the only thing we dump is love on those cattle, and she looked at me like I was speaking Chinese. Her complaints grew increasingly bizarre. Karen filed reports with the Postal Service about unsafe ranch road conditions affecting mail delivery, the same road our mail carrier had used safely for 37 years. She measured dust particles with handheld devices, documenting air quality violations that were actually just Texas wind blowing Texas dirt. The mini twist came when Karen's husband cracked under financial pressure. Dave Whitmore had been hiding their true situation from his wife, but the mounting legal costs and her escalating obsession forced a confession that Buck's security cameras captured through their open kitchen window. Karen, we're broke, Dave's voice carried across the evening air. We owe $89,000 in California, back taxes, liens, and legal settlements. We moved here to avoid wage garnishment. We can't afford to lose house value or pay HOA assessments. You have to stop this madness. But Karen was too deep in her crusade to quit. Like a gambler doubling down on bad bets, she'd invested too much pride to walk away now. My federal investigation accelerated with discoveries that made Karen's complaints look like child's play. The HOA compliance review revealed $127,000 in unaccounted administrative expenses over 3 years. The previous board president, before Karen's involvement, appeared to have embezzled funds meant for infrastructure maintenance. This financial mismanagement meant the HOA lacked resources to address permit violations even if they wanted to comply. They were functionally bankrupt while facing hundreds of thousands in required compliance costs. Karen's media blitz continued backfiring spectacularly. She appeared on KTXS talk radio, contradicting her previous statements about our ranch timeline. When she claimed we'd moved in after the subdivision, host Jim Bradley fact-checked her live using the county property database. "Ma'am," Bradley said, the sound of rustling papers audible over the airwaves, "these records show the White Hawk Ranch was established in 1887. Your subdivision was approved in 2023. That's a difference of about 136 years." Callers overwhelmingly supported our ranch, sharing their own HOA horror stories. The taste of public vindication was sweeter than morning coffee on a cold day. Community pressure mounted like storm clouds before a tornado. Subdivision residents received county notices about permit violations and potential special assessments. Their insurance company threatened coverage cancellation due to development non-compliance. 3 families put houses on the market rather than face financial ruin. The HOA board called an emergency meeting to discuss removing Karen from leadership positions. Even her most loyal supporters were abandoning ship as the legal and financial consequences became clear. Meanwhile, I maintained strategic silence, continuing normal ranch operations while Karen created chaos around herself. My federal training had taught me that the best way to handle unstable situations is through calm consistency. Document everything, respond factually when contacted, but never escalate unnecessarily. Environmental consultants delivered reports that destroyed Karen's remaining arguments. Our ranch operations actually improved local water table management through natural drainage patterns. The subdivision's stormwater system relied on this drainage flowing through our property, a dependency acknowledged in original development permits. Removing or restricting our operations could cause flooding throughout the subdivision during heavy rains. Karen's complaints threatened the very infrastructure her community depended on for basic safety. Her former allies jumped ship faster than rats from a burning barn. Bryce Kellerman publicly resigned from the Property Values Committee, citing concerns about legal liability and factual inaccuracies in their campaign. Donna Hutchins moved back to Phoenix, telling neighbors she was tired of manufactured drama and wanted to escape before special assessments hit. Only one resident still supported Karen, a recent arrival who hadn't researched the legal complexities and would soon discover the financial implications of her loyalty. Karen's harassment escalated to truly dangerous levels. She blocked our supply truck at the subdivision entrance, demanding to inspect cargo like some self-appointed customs agent. She took photographs through ranch windows with telephoto lenses, documenting our family activities like a private investigator. Most disturbing, she followed me to town meetings, the feed store, and Rita's diner, maintaining visual contact like a stalker building a case. When she filed a police report claiming our ranch dogs were menacing animals that were 200 yards away behind secure fencing, even the sheriff's deputy looked embarrassed. "Mr. Whitehawk," Deputy Martinez said, "I've explained agricultural protection laws to Mrs. Whitmore 3 times now. I'm starting to think she needs to consult an attorney before filing any more complaints." The warning was clear. Karen was approaching criminal harassment territory, and law enforcement was losing patience with her manufactured emergencies. Karen's final desperate gambit revealed the depths of her delusion. She hired a private investigator to find dirt on my federal position, apparently believing that professional scrutiny would uncover the corruption she imagined. She contacted congressional representatives claiming federal employee abuse of power and attempted to organize a multi-county agricultural reform movement that attracted exactly 0 supporters outside her subdivision. Her crowdfunding campaign told the whole story. The GoFundMe for legal expenses to fight government corruption raised a pathetic $347 in 3 weeks, mostly from relatives who probably donated out of pity rather than principle. The investigation she'd commissioned backfired like a defective firework. The private investigator discovered my exemplary federal service record, commendations for community involvement, and 0 conflicts of interest. When congressional staffers looked into her complaints, They found Karen's history of frivolous lawsuits across multiple states and dismissed her allegations as the ravings of a serial complainer. The Federal Ethics Review cleared me completely while commending my volunteer work with agricultural preservation programs. Karen's credibility evaporated like morning dew in August heat. Meanwhile, the subdivision crisis deepened beyond anyone's worst nightmares. The county issued a formal compliance order with a 90-day deadline to address permit violations or face legal action. The HOA board voted unanimously to remove Karen from all leadership positions, realizing she'd become a liability threatening everyone's financial stability. The emergency special assessment was approved at $12,500 per household, money most residents didn't have and couldn't borrow against homes that were losing value daily. 6 more families listed properties for sale, flooding the local market and driving prices down further. Karen's harassment escalated into textbook stalking behavior. She followed my truck with her SUV, taking photographs while driving dangerously close. Buck's security cameras captured her parking outside our property for hours, using binoculars to observe our activities like some demented wildlife researcher. She approached our customers and suppliers at the feed store, attempting to disrupt business relationships with wild stories about illegal operations and government cover-ups. Marty Kowalski finally banned her from his property after she accused him of participating in agricultural conspiracy theories. The woman created fake social media accounts to spread rumors about our ranch operations, posting elaborate theories about federal corruption and environmental violations. The posts were so unhinged that most people assumed they were parody accounts making fun of HOA extremists. Legal intervention became inevitable. Sarah Olivia filed a restraining order petition with extensive documentation of Karen's escalating harassment pattern. The sheriff's office recommended criminal stalking charges based on her behavior escalating from complaints to surveillance to direct confrontation. The county attorney reviewed our case for possible criminal harassment prosecution. Judge Williams granted a temporary protective order requiring Karen to stay 500 yards from our ranch property, essentially barring her from half the county roads she'd been using for surveillance. Media attention peaked when Channel 7 aired Jake Morrison's full investigative piece, "When HOAs Go Wrong, A Texas Tale." The story focused on development permit failures, financial mismanagement, and legal obligations that could bankrupt individual homeowners through special assessments. Morrison interviewed longtime residents who praised our ranch's community contributions, contrasted with Karen's documented harassment campaign. The piece exposed not just local drama, but systemic problems with HOA accountability nationwide. Federal spotlight intensified when the congressional subcommittee scheduled hearings on HOA oversight reform. My testimony would feature Sagebrush Estates as a case study in regulatory failure, and national media picked up the story as an example of suburban-rural conflict gone wrong. Federal housing officials announced stricter HOA compliance requirements partly based on our situation. Karen's local harassment had inadvertently triggered national policy discussions about development accountability. Her support system collapsed completely. Dave threatened divorce if the harassment continued. Their adult children refused to visit due to embarrassing behavior, and remaining neighbors avoided contact or considered their own legal action against her. The HOA attorney advised the board to distance themselves from Karen's actions to avoid liability. Her isolation was total financially ruined, legally threatened, and socially ostracized by the very community she claimed to protect. Ranch operations continued normally despite the ongoing circus. We hosted successful school field trips showcasing sustainable farming, received the county fair's agricultural heritage recognition, and maintained our economic contributions to the local community. Technical studies confirmed everything we'd known for generations. Environmental impact assessments showed our operations benefited the local ecosystem. Water management analysis proved the subdivision depended on our drainage patterns. Economic reports quantified our $230,000 annual contribution to county commerce. Karen's final confrontation attempt violated the restraining order spectacularly. She approached me at the courthouse steps, claiming I'd ruined her life through government conspiracy, while courthouse security cameras captured every word. "You destroyed my family," she screamed, pointing an accusing finger while deputies moved to intervene. "You used your federal position to persecute innocent homeowners." The irony was perfect. Karen being arrested for violating a restraining order while accusing me of abusing power. Her mugshot appeared in the county newspaper next to an article about our ranch receiving heritage preservation recognition. Additional charges were filed for restraining order violation and criminal stalking. The woman who'd tried to have me arrested for trespassing on my own land was now facing jail time for harassing a federal employee. Justice tasted sweeter than Rita's apple pie and twice as satisfying. The House Subcommittee on Housing and Community Development convened in Austin on a Tuesday that would change everything. C-SPAN cameras rolled as I took the witness stand, transforming our local conflict into a national conversation about HOA accountability and agricultural protection. Mr. Whitehawk, Congressman Martinez began, please explain how the Sagebrush Estates case illustrates systemic failures in HOA oversight. The irony was delicious. Karen had inadvertently provided me with the perfect platform to address problems affecting rural communities nationwide. As I testified about development permit failures and agricultural harassment, millions of viewers learned how HOAs could destroy both property values and community harmony through regulatory negligence. Karen attempted to attend the hearing but was removed by Capitol Security for disrupting proceedings with shouted accusations about government corruption. Her ejection was broadcast live, cementing her reputation as an unhinged extremist rather than a concerned citizen. The restraining order hearing, scheduled the same week, became a masterclass in legal consequence. Karen represented herself never a wise choice making rambling accusations about federal conspiracies while Judge Williams reviewed chronological evidence of her harassment campaign. Sarah Olivia presented security footage, police reports, and witness statements with clinical precision. The judge watched videos of Karen measuring our fence lines at dawn, photographing cattle through slats, and following my truck through town with obvious surveillance intent. Mrs. Whitmore, Judge Williams said, his voice carrying the weight of 30 years on the bench, this court finds your behavior constitutes systematic harassment of law-abiding agricultural operations. The evidence demonstrates a clear pattern of escalating misconduct that threatens public safety. The permanent restraining order expanded the protective perimeter to 1,000 yards. Criminal stalking charges were referred to the district attorney. Court costs and legal fees were awarded to our ranch money Karen couldn't afford to pay. Outside the courthouse, media circus reached peak intensity. National news trucks lined the square while Karen gave an impromptu press conference that destroyed any remaining credibility. She contradicted earlier statements, claimed I controlled the government, and accused our ranch of destroying her family. The video went viral within hours. HOA Karen trended nationally with 2.3 million views in the first day, becoming a cautionary tale about suburban entitlement and rural harassment. Late-night comedians made jokes about measuring cow manure and calling police on century-old ranches. My congressional testimony generated immediate policy impact. The subcommittee adopted my recommendations for federal HOA oversight reform, including stronger protections for agricultural operations adjacent to residential developments. New requirements for development permit compliance monitoring would prevent future Karen situations. A $50 million federal grant program for agricultural heritage preservation was announced, directly inspired by our case. The program would help family farms resist development pressure while maintaining community character. County commissioners formally recognized our ranch as an agricultural heritage site, adding state historical protection that Karen could never challenge. The local tourism board created working ranch tours, featuring our operation, generating additional revenue while educating visitors about authentic agricultural heritage. Property values in our area increased due to the heritage designation, the opposite of Karen's dire predictions. Neighboring landowners thanked us for protecting rural character against suburban encroachment. Sagebrush Estates faced harsh consequences. The HOA completed required permit compliance at a cost of $380,000. Forcing special assessments that bankrupted 3 families and caused 6 more to sell homes at significant losses. Property values plummeted as word spread about regulatory failures and financial mismanagement. The new HOA board implemented strict anti-harassment policies, recognizing that Karen's behavior had created legal liability for the entire community. They publicly apologized to our ranch and established cooperative agreements for mutual benefit. Karen's personal downfall was complete. Her house entered foreclosure due to legal costs and California back taxes. Dave filed for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences and seeking restraining orders of his own. Their adult children refused further contact, embarrassed by her public behavior and legal troubles. She moved out of state with no forwarding address, leaving behind a trail of legal judgments and unpaid debts. The criminal stalking case proceeded to trial, where she eventually pleaded guilty to avoid jail time. Federal policy changes emerged directly from our situation. New regulations required HOA disclosure of all permit compliance obligations to potential buyers. Agricultural protection laws were strengthened in federal housing programs. Frivolous complaint penalties increased dramatically for harassment cases. Regional oversight directors gained authority to investigate HOA abuse patterns, preventing future agricultural harassment campaigns. Our case became the model for rural-suburban conflict resolution nationwide. The mic drop moment came during my final television interview with Jake Morrison. When he asked about Karen's legacy, I revealed the ultimate irony. She never researched the property she bought. Agricultural easements were clearly marked on original disclosure documents. She signed acknowledgement of agricultural activities during home purchase. Her entire complaint campaign violated her own contractual agreements. The courthouse square erupted in laughter from supporters who'd gathered to watch the live broadcast. Karen's final TV appearance ended with her storming off set after Morrison read her own signed property disclosure acknowledging ranch operations and agricultural easements. Justice had been served with a side of poetic irony that would be remembered for generations. 6 months later, life had settled into a rhythm sweeter than honey from our own beehives. Whitehawk Ranch earned Century Farm designation from the State Agriculture Department, joining an elite group of family operations that had survived multiple generations of change. Our educational programs now host over 2,000 students annually, teaching sustainable ranching practices to kids who smell fresh hay and hear cattle lowing instead of car horns and sirens. Buck Henley got the promotion he'd earned after 40 years of loyal service operations manager with 2 additional staff members and a salary that finally matched his value. The agritourism operation generates an extra $180,000 annually, proving that authentic agricultural heritage attracts people seeking real experiences over suburban fantasies. Sagebrush Estates transformed under new leadership committed to neighbor cooperation rather than conflict. The annual Ranch Heritage Day Festival raises funds for the County Historical Society while celebrating the agricultural traditions that built our community. Property values stabilized 15% above pre-controversy levels as buyers sought the authentic rural lifestyle Karen had tried to destroy. 3 new families moved to our area specifically for agricultural proximity, understanding that working ranches create the character that makes rural living special. The contrast with Karen's vision couldn't be starker. People want real heritage, not sanitized suburban pretense. My congressional testimony led to the HOA Accountability Act of 2025, landmark legislation requiring transparency in development obligations and stronger agricultural protections. The federal grant program funded 47 agricultural preservation projects in its first year, saving family farms from development pressure nationwide. Our case became the template for rural-suburban conflict resolution, studied in law schools and planning departments as an example of how community solidarity defeats individual harassment. The model prevents agricultural harassment while protecting property rights for everyone involved. Karen's aftermath was less inspiring. She pleaded guilty to criminal stalking charges, receiving probated sentence and mandatory counseling for harassment behavior. The divorce was finalized with Dave keeping their remaining assets while Karen moved to Oregon with no forwarding address and deleted social media accounts. She became a cautionary tale in HOA management training programs, the perfect example of how individual obsession can destroy entire communities. Property management companies now use Karen's Law as shorthand for policies preventing harassment of neighboring agricultural operations. Legal precedents from our case strengthened agricultural protection legislation in 12 states. HOA insurance rates increased for communities with harassment liability, creating financial incentives for responsible neighbor relations. Property disclosure requirements expanded to include agricultural easements, preventing future buyers from claiming ignorance about rural activities. Educational initiatives flourished beyond our wildest expectations. The Ranch Scholarship Fund provides $50,000 annually for agricultural students, many of whom return to strengthen our local farming community. Our partnership with Texas A&M produces research on sustainable ranching that benefits operations throughout the Southwest. The 4-H program expansion reaches 340 rural youth across the region, teaching livestock management, environmental stewardship, and agricultural business principles. Conservation easements now protect our ranch from future development pressure, ensuring these educational opportunities continue for generations. Media legacy continued growing. The documentary Fences and Neighbors won regional film festival awards. My book, When HOAs Attack Agriculture, became a bestseller among rural property owners, and speaking tours reached over 50,000 homeowners about property rights and neighbor relations. The consulting business helps resolve similar rural-suburban conflicts, with 23 successful mediations preventing litigation and community destruction. Sometimes the best solutions come from understanding rather than fighting. Personal happiness completed the picture. Sarah Olivia and I married in a ceremony at the ranch chapel my great-grandfather built, surrounded by family, friends, and the cattle that started this whole adventure. We adopted 2 children from the foster system, raising them on working land where they learn responsibility, respect, and the value of honest work. Property tax revenue increases from heritage, tourism support, county schools, and services. Local businesses report 25% increases in agriculture-related sales. Tourism brings $400,000 annually to Millfield County, proving that authentic rural heritage creates prosperity for everyone. The bigger picture shows lasting change. Federal HOA reform prevents an estimated 10,000 harassment cases annually. Agricultural preservation funds save 127,000 acres from inappropriate development, and rural suburban mediation programs resolve conflicts before litigation destroys communities. As sunset paints the sky orange and purple, I watch our children play in the ranch yard while Sarah tends her vegetable garden. Tour buses arrive for evening educational programs, county sheriff waves a friendly greeting, and cattle graze peacefully in pastures that have fed families for over a century. Sometimes the best way to handle a bully is letting them defeat themselves. Property rights research before buying saves everyone headaches later. Community healing happens when good people stand up for what's right. Share your HOA nightmare in the comments. Let's support each other. Subscribe for more. David versus Goliath justice stories, and ring that bell if you believe in protecting agricultural heritage. Next week, how I used eminent domain laws to stop a casino from destroying my town's main street.
That's all for today's HOA madness. If watching justice serve itself made your day, smash that like button, share your thoughts down below, and make sure you're subscribed. More outrageous neighborhood showdowns are just around the corner.